So now we're deepening today's presentation into the heart of storytelling. And we hope that you will either be able to participate in this side of getting your story out or receiving. And there's no one better to begin this with the incredible work that we get to see now in this documentary that we talked about earlier. I'm thrilled to pass the mic in just a moment, but not yet. I learned that with kids, you have to say that in a moment, not yet. I'm going to pass the mic to Dev Herbert to introduce the very first screening of her documentary, The Imperfect Mothers Club. This film has been a labor of love, pun intended, capturing the raw and real experiences of parents navigating postpartum mental health challenges. Before we dive in, take a moment. It is heavy. If you do need to feel like you need to step outside, I completely understand. We do have therapists here if you need anything on either side. I was really moved by this piece, and I want to say honestly, this is the perfect bridge into sharing the healing space. Please welcome to the podium, Dev Herbert.
I have learned so much today, and over the course of the last year, every time I gather with people, it just blows my mind, and I can see from the people in this room that we can make this happen together. We're ready. We have a champion heading to the White House, hopefully. I just wanted to say I'm honored to be here today. And the reason I'm here is because I didn't understand why storytelling was so healing until I went through the process. And I went into the clinic feeling like I should die, feeling like I had no feelings for my baby, I'm a monster, and the thoughts in my head were too horrible to ever admit out loud. And then I sat there on the first day and heard someone say she wanted to send her baby back to the fire station, and then the next day I heard from a woman who said that she was gonna crush up some pills and put it in her toddler's applesauce because she was such a terrible mother that the world would be better without her, but she didn't want her children to grow up without a mother. So we wonder why women drive their cars into lakes, because they're not getting help and they're being villainized. And so I saw these women and I realized they're not monsters, they're sick, and it's not their fault. And through having compassion for them, I started the long journey of letting go of all the guilt and shame that I had accumulated over the course of my pregnancy. And I learned how to be a mom. You know, I went in there kind of afraid to be alone with my baby, and they were so gentle. They said, we're gonna do some almond oil massages today, and you do it, and then your baby starts smiling, and you're like, oh, this is a tool. This is how I can be with my baby. One last thing I want to say is that a lot of the women you will hear from today are here, so if you want to talk to them, please do afterwards. But a lot of them had really bad experiences at the hands of our medical system, and so doctors get a pretty bad, OB-GYNs get a pretty bad rap. And after speaking to Danielle Vachon, who's here with us today, and hearing her practically crying, saying, no, we are aware, we are trying, and work is being done. And, you know, ACOG has gotten a law passed that now insurance has to cover 12 months of postpartum care, whereas they didn't used to, et cetera. So this is the beginning of a longer documentary. Many more voices will join this. And I just want to thank those of you in the medical community who care so much. And I hope you like the movie.
If I could describe it, it's just like being stuck in a dark room alone. And no one's there, and you feel like no one could see you.
As soon as they put your baby on your chest, you know, you're supposed to just feel something. And I didn't.
They brought him in and they were like, "This is your son." And I didn't feel anything.
I thought my baby was Jesus. I thought I was Jesus. I thought I was Mary. I was completely in another realm.
I was like, not even gonna tell Mike. I'm just gonna get in the car right now and take her to the fire station and leave her there because I can't do this.
I remember asking my husband to just let me die. When people think about postpartum, I think that there's this common misconception that all women that experience postpartum have the intent of harming their child.
Postpartum depression shows up in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be this overwhelming, harmful thought kind of experience. It can look like low energy. It can look like no appetite. It can look like not feeling like yourself, not having a sense of self. It can also look like having unrealistic expectations for yourself.
And I think that that's why it took me so long to figure out, hey, something's not right. I need help. It wasn't until I started going to like groups with other women that experienced postpartum that I was like, wow, I am not broken.
It turns out that sharing your story is the cure.
Going into motherhood, I had very idealistic, rosy expectations. I had married the man of my dreams. I got my dream job. I moved to LA and I was ready to have the perfect pregnancy. I took prenatal yoga class, prenatal swimming classes. I read every book.
By the time I was 18, we were married and we were trying for babies. It was maybe a 2 or 3 year battle to try to get my daughter, Nolani. It wasn't until we stopped trying that she happened.
I was not happy when I found out I was pregnant. I always planned on, waiting until I was about 35 or 36 and building my career and traveling the world and enjoying my marriage, just giving them the type of lifestyle that I wasn't able to have, where I was from. So when I had him and I still, I thought I would just, fall immediately in love and have all of these feelings, and it didn't happen. I'm like, oh no, something really is wrong.
For most women, the reality of motherhood and the reality of pregnancy is not what we've been led to believe it's going to be. There's this myth of motherhood that has been built in our society over a long, long time, and we just grow up and we absorb it.
I can do it all. I can be perfect. I can work and manage a household and care for my baby in the perfect way.
Moms should be happy. Moms should be grateful.
Everybody always tells you when you have your first child, it was like the best feeling in the world and you instantly knew what love was.
People feel like, oh my God, well, my life isn't perfect and we don't look great 6 days postpartum and I feel like shit today, but everybody I follow on Instagram feels amazing and they're walking in the park with their baby with their latte.
So oftentimes when I speak to women, they come to me with what they're supposed to feel like. I'm supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to love my baby. I'm supposed to be excited to see her and want to hold her. But all I can think of is how I'm not feeling those ways. And so there must be something wrong with me.
I didn't know anybody in my family that had ever had postpartum depression.
I had never heard about postpartum anxiety.
I knew that it was something that my culture in particular does not talk about.
Postpartum depression encompasses postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis, postpartum OCD. So all of those things are, I guess, fall under the umbrella of people's understanding of what postpartum depression is.
Some of the risk factors are struggling with perfectionism, struggling with anxiety or depression,
I'm an older mom, which puts me at high risk for postpartum.
having a baby that's difficult to soothe, or struggling with insomnia,
Fertility treatments.
difficulty breastfeeding. There's so many problems that are stacked up against mothers.
Giving birth is a traumatic event, and women, once they've delivered their babies, are traumatized because they didn't have that expectation. Sometimes complications happen after birth, maybe several days after, and we have to recognize that that increases the likelihood of a trauma response for these women.
I remember telling my husband about it, like, hey, there's this thing called postpartum depression. What should we do if, this happens to me? And his reaction was just like, let's focus on the positive. Let's not worry about something that's not gonna happen. And sure enough, I got it with my oldest, but I did not seek the help that I needed. It was June 1st. This time around, I was like, we're gonna take newborn pictures, like professional ones, nice ones. After the photo shoot, we got home. It was a long day. She did amazing. Mind you, I'm breastfeeding her. This time around, my breast milk was coming in. It was great. But then, as I'm feeding her, I feel like a gush of something come out. All right. Go to the restroom, and I just go, oh, fuck. So I was hemorrhaging. They took me to the neighboring hospital, which is Centinela Hospital. The ER was packed. I was waiting outside. There was a line to get in. Do they know that I'm bleeding? They're like, yeah, you might be next. Centinela Hospital is located in a community that's predominantly Hispanic and African American. Not once did anyone check how much I was bleeding. I struggle with this because I get mad at myself for not advocating for myself.
Advocacy gets as far as what you look like or how much money you have. To access competent healthcare providers, you need good medical insurance, which means you need to make a certain amount of money. Or you need to look a certain way, and they actually care about what you have to say.
The baby was going really, really fast. When it was time for delivery, I told him I would really like to try to, have a regular delivery, but it was so odd because he still brought me in like 3 to 4 weeks early. They numbed me for the C-section, but they didn't numb me all the way. So when he began cutting me, it was so much pain. He cut it small at first, but then he kept ripping me open, trying to pull the baby out. I felt like I witnessed my own murder. And at that point, he said that we had gone too far. He couldn't give me anything else. But I know now that I never had to have any C-sections. And he makes more money when he has C-sections. And they said that usually he can perform a whole C-section, have the baby out in 15 minutes. And they're laughing about it. I didn't get a chance to see him, when he was born. And so they brought him in and they were like, this is your son. And I didn't feel anything. In my heart. I was just looking at him. I'm like, wow, okay. I have a son, and I'm thinking like, well, maybe, I'm still in some kind of trauma because of what I just experienced.
Postpartum psychosis is a break in reality after you have a baby. I ended up having a 36-hour labor. I didn't sleep during that time. And I had him at a birth center with an unmedicated vaginal birth. And 4 hours later, I was sent home. That night, when I was supposed to be sleeping, when my baby was sleeping, I was Googling how to breastfeed. And I still couldn't sleep. I ended up going 5 days with no sleep until I remember I was nursing my baby and looking down, and I saw in his eye a vagina, and inside the vagina was a hole. And I thought, me and my baby are going to fall into that hole. And that's when I knew there was something really wrong with me.
Lack of sleep, in my experience, has been one of the precursors to all of the postpartum psychosis patients that I've seen. So if I could say anything to women, sleep.
I knew how important it was to breastfeed because breast is best. It gets drilled into women pretty early. Your baby's gonna come out and your baby's gonna lay in your chest, and by natural instinct, they're gonna find your bosom and your nipple and they'll start suckling, and that's so important for your bonding, and breast milk is gonna make their immune system grow, and if you don't breastfeed, it just seemed like you weren't gonna bond, your baby wouldn't thrive.
I had issues breastfeeding my first child and wasn't able to do it and just felt awful. I remember trying to go to like a mommy and me after Ari was born. There's even pressure within those groups because you show up and it's time to feed your baby and you're the only one busting out a bottle of formula and everybody looks at you, you know? I had this expectation of motherhood, like, well, she did it, I can do it. And I tied a lot of my worth as a mom to being able to breastfeed. I started cutting myself because it kind of spiraled, right? It went from like, I can't breastfeed, so I'm an unworthy mother, to like, my kids would be better off without me, to everybody would be better off without me. And I lived there for a long time. And like so much so that like my body hurt. It was like if I felt the pain that was being generated in my head and my chest, if I felt it somewhere else on my body, it released it.
Women are being told that breastfeeding is best. However, if the mother is so distressed and not sleeping and having difficulty expressing milk, causing anxiety, maybe exacerbating depression, then breast is absolutely not best. And there are other ways to nourish a baby. We have to normalize that breast is not best. What's best is what's best for you too.
Women have been marginalized, and our mental health has been dismissed or blamed on us for hundreds of years.
Our medical model is not set up to really support new parents. There's no time for it. There's no space for it. Doctors don't sit down with their clients postpartum. You see your doctor maybe like the day after you give birth, and then you see your doctor 6 weeks after you give birth. Postpartum depression can creep up anywhere in that missed time. They're just like, oh, you look good, baby looks good. Okay, see you for your pap smear in 3 years.
You feel like you're set aside and put in the trash can, you know, at least that's how I feel. Even if you just look at the rates of maternal deaths in America, we kind of dropped the ball.
There's a lot of frustration attached to the medical system as it stands today. And so when you're feeling this vulnerable and then you have to go through all the hoops of calling your insurance company and trying to find a doctor and trying to find a provider and all of that, you give up and you feel lost.
The like process of getting a psychiatrist or getting a therapist was entirely overwhelming on top of everything else I was going through and not cheap at all. What do you do if you can't spend $300 an hour for a psychiatrist, right? Like, you just suffer, right?
Postpartum depression is very treatable with the right kind of help, therapy, group therapy, medication if warranted. Group therapy, in particular for postpartum depression, is magic. I've run groups over many years, and it is really where women feel the most relief. Like, you can see it happen before your eyes.
I was actually referred to this group of moms. And I was like, I don't need a mom support group, you know? Like, it was that whole thing of like, I don't need it. And I went one time and somebody was bringing up the challenge of going through postpartum and trying to be in school full time. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me.
When I meet young mothers or young parents, I tell them my story, and I can't tell you how many times they're like, oh my God, me too.
When I heard other women's stories, it kind of like some of that weight from the depression got lifted. Oh, this happens to people, and there's no judgment here, and there's like a world where it's like the world is imperfect and it's okay.
Sharing our stories will cure us, but we have to have permission to talk out loud without fear of judgment, without shame. And only we as women and mothers can give each other permission to do that.
Every woman who gets help and gets treatment spreads the word. And then she tells the next woman who's maybe ashamed to talk about it, oh, I went through that. This is what I did. This is how I got help. Here's some places. And then that woman gets help, and it's exponential.
If I could go back to myself when I was in the darkest and the lowest points, what advice would I give?
Call me. You know, we'll cry about it, we'll laugh about it. You can cuss, punch, kick, spit, whatever you want to do. But I'm here to remind you of who you were, because that's what I know I needed, and I didn't even know that I needed.
Get the help you need, because that's postpartum. That's not you.
That's what it's all about. Even if sharing my story helps one person, great.
Are the women here today? If they would like to stand, would you mind? Can we honor them? I would love to, if you're willing to stand, the incredible women, Anya, Gina, Marie, Sandra, Cassie, and Deb. They're here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.